That was one of the more exciting 19-3 games I've ever seen, if that's even possible.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mike, because it's not one of those games where you sit there and go, oh, this is just horrible, this is boring, whatever. I mean, the Jets fans, to me, made it kind of fun. I mean, those were mock cheers there at the end when Streveler was doing what he was doing. They'd pick up a first down, and you hear all the cheers like they just scored a touchdown. So it kept me entertained, I'll say that, till the very end.
I don't know. If, at first, I thought it was real. I was surprised, number one, that so many people had stayed. First, I was surprised they were even there in the first place. But going in, you had hope, right? Even after 3 straight losses, at 7-7, you're alive. Now, it's going to be a lot harder now that they've lost, but to show up is one thing. To stay is really the impressive part. To not storm out of there at halftime. To not exit to the vehicles when Zach Wilson continues to be the quarterback in the third quarter, because it just wasn't working. And the thing that impressed me the most, if we can get the still frame of it, the fan with the sign.
Yeah.
That says all I want for Christmas is for a new quarterback other than Zach Wilson in 2023. I'm not getting it exactly right because that would be a lot to fit on a sign. But it was a lot on the sign. There it is. All I want in 2023 is for Zach not to be our quarterback, ! Wrapped in plastic to protect it from the elements. That is next level preparation. Yes. And the look on the face. Now, obviously, the person didn't know that they were being, filmed, so no reason to smile. But no reason to smile anyway. So that was probably the look all night long for Jets fans at MetLife Stadium, Charean.
Yeah, it sure was, Mike, and who knows what the future holds, but it's obvious those fans are tired of Zach Wilson and ready for a new quarterback to lead them, and it's obvious that the Jets aren't going to make the playoffs this season, and I think they had high hopes after the way the team started, and now they don't. So who knows what the future holds for this team, this quarterback, but I think we know what the immediate future is for the Jets, and it doesn't include the playoffs. For them, unfortunate 2 days before Christmas, Mike, that they already have that feeling that they're not going to be there in the end.
And we're going to break all this down and talk about what happened last night, but something that just occurred to me that ties together a couple of different ongoing stories in the NFL. The Jets continue to get it badly wrong whenever they decide to use one of those scratch-off lottery tickets in round one on a quarterback. Mark Sanchez ultimately didn't work out, although at one point he had racked up 4 straight road playoff wins, which was, and I think still may be, a record, although with Tom Brady still hanging around. No, he picked up 3 in 1 year, so I assume Brady has beaten him. But it was a career record at one point when Sanchez had 4 playoff wins on the road in his first 2 NFL seasons, for crying out loud. Then they get Sam Darnold. Trade up from 6-3 with the Colts to get Sam Darnold. Darnold doesn't work out. Now Zach Wilson doesn't work out. And this is a difficult analysis because is it the player? Is it the coaching staff? Is it the organization? Is it the circumstance? Whatever it may be. Here's my point. I wrote something about this a couple of weeks ago on PFT, and there's been a lot of talk about NIL this week, thanks to Dabo Swinney, who said something I still don't quite fully understand. But with the money that high-end quarterbacks are now in a position to make playing college football, they will be better equipped to tell a team like the Jets, sorry, don't draft me. Don't draft me or trade this pick and get what you can because I'm not signing with you because I got $10 million in the bank. I don't need your $22 million signing bonus, which is what Zach Wilson got 2021. So it's something to keep an eye on because, yes, Zach Wilson has failed to live up to his expectations. And this wasn't some reach by the Jets. This wasn't some crazy, what are they thinking pick. Everyone regarded him as number 2 behind Trevor Lawrence. Everyone. It just hasn't worked out. But if any of this falls on the Jets, the way they've handled it, and they haven't handled it well this year, let's just call it what it is. They have not handled this situation well. You got to start worrying about the message that sends to anyone else out there in the future that you may want to pick with a first-round selection at quarterback if you're the Jets. They better clean this up, and they better handle this properly, or they may have themselves in a spot where the next time they earn the number 2 overall pick or number 1 or number 3 or wherever and they want a quarterback, that quarterback may say no thank you, Charean.
Well, and Mike, there's several things that make this more glaring even than just Zach Wilson not proving so far anyway that he was worthy of that number 2 overall pick. And one is the player that he played against last night, and that's Trevor Lawrence, because they came out in the same draft. So you're watching these two quarterbacks, they're playing against each other, and Lawrence has taken that next step. We've seen it this year. We've seen the progress that he's made over these last 7 games, this 5-2 stretch that has them in the midst of winning a division championship if they win their last 2 games. So I think that's part of it. Here's another thing. The Pro Bowl came out Wednesday. Who was on that Pro Bowl list? Geno Smith, a guy the Jets had and sent away, and just one of the many quarterbacks that is, as the quarterbacks cycle through there, he's one guy who did change when he went somewhere else. And if you're the Jets, that's kind of what you worry about too, is if you send this guy off and he's better than what you thought, it sure does look bad on your organization that you weren't able to develop this guy and have a good quarterback, that you spent all this draft capital plus the money you spent on him with 2 fully guaranteed years left on that contract. So, yeah, to me, this is just glaring, and it was more glaring with what we've seen over this week. And combined with that, what Brock Purdy has just stepped in and done with the 49ers. Because I guarantee you the Jets think they have a team good enough to go to the postseason. It's the quarterback. It's solely on the quarterback.
Geno Smith was not a first-round pick. He lingered into round 2, but it was the same idea. This is our next guy. This is the guy who's going to take us to where we've been trying to go for 50-plus years, our next Joe Namath. I know they've had other decent quarterbacks along the way, but they haven't had a Super Bowl champion. They haven't even been in a Super Bowl since Super Bowl III. The Geno Smith, I'm glad you mentioned him, because this – look, I understand, and I wrote about this last night, because it was bugging me, the whole Zach Wilson thing. And we'll dig into more details of the game. But we're trying to take what everyone else is talking about and spin it forward. You can put on any other show right now, and they'll say, Zach Wilson's bad. Okay, where do we go from here? We can all stipulate that Zach Wilson is not performing at a sufficiently high level, regardless of the reason, and there may be many. But the Jets now have to decide what to do. On one hand, you double down or triple down. And some very smart people in football will always say the worst thing you can do when you've made a mistake is refuse to admit it and compound it by trying to justify it, by trying to will it into not a mistake. No, we're not going to admit we made a mistake. We're going to keep going forward with this plan that isn't working. And that feels like where the Jets are right now, at least as of last night, as they kept him in and kept him in and kept him in. We are going to make this work. We have to make this work because he was 2nd overall pick in the draft. Okay, that's the way a dysfunctional team does it. The Geno Smith reference you made, Charean, caused me to think of this. The fact that Geno Smith did well somewhere else should make the Jets want to find a way to give Zach Wilson a fresh start, so that when they are in a position in the future, and inevitably they will be, to use a 1st, 2nd, or 3rd overall pick on a quarterback, that's an argument in their favor. If it doesn't work out, we're not going to force you to stay here. We're not going to continue to wreck your career if we get to the point where, objectively, anyone paying attention to this knows it just needs to end. We're not going to treat you that way. We're going to find another place where you can continue your career, and then it's on you to try to turn it around. That's going to be hard for them to accept, because it looks bad for them if they give up on Zach Wilson and he becomes a Pro Bowler somewhere else. But at a deeper level, it may be the only way they can salvage a relationship from the get-go with their next would-be Joe Namath high-level draft pick, because I'm telling you, it's time for the Jets to be thinking about that long-term. Not necessarily the current GM or the head coach. This is an ownership issue that they need to understand, because they're the ones who will be there the next time there's a 1, 2, or a 3 pick that goes to the Jets at quarterback. It's a real issue that hasn't happened yet for any team, or it hasn't happened since Eli Manning in 2004, but this new NIL reality is going to make it more common. Jets need to be thinking about it. So great call on Geno Smith, because that tells me the right thing for the Jets to do is just declare that it's over and give the kid a chance to go become who he can be somewhere else.
Yeah, it's an interesting, and I don't know if it's dilemma because both sides of a dilemma are bad, but it's an interesting decision, at least, that the Jets have to make. And it's a question of, do you go maybe get a bridge-type quarterback and either keep him there or not? Mike White's a free agent. To me, you re-sign Mike White, but do you go get a Jimmy Garoppolo or take a run at Tom Brady or something like that and have you a quarterback who you feel like you can win with? Because I know the Jets feel like they have the talent to win and the talent to win now. And they showed that earlier in the season. They were winning. They were playing really good football and beating some good teams. So I think they do have the team, especially when they get that running game going again next year, when they're fully healthy there in the offensive line and at running back. I think they can run the ball really well. So that's a question they're going to face. Like, who do you it's always, Mike, when you change quarterbacks, you've got to find somebody better. And if you can't find somebody better, then you stick with the guy who you think can be better. So they've got to figure out first, I guess, make that move of, all right, we got to figure out who our quarterback is going to be, and then we decide what to do with Zach Wilson. In other words, it's sort of like the Rams decided to move on from Jared Goff, but they waited to find out who that quarterback was going to be until they actually moved on from Jared Goff. And they got Matthew Stafford to replace Jared Goff. And they made that decision that he's not going to get us over the hump. We have to make a move here, and this is the move we're going to make. And they found that quarterback first. So that's what they have to determine is who's that quarterback going to be replaced. You can't just say, well, we're going to get rid of Zach Wilson. Okay, is Mike White? You're going to re-sign Mike White? Or what are you going to do at the quarterback position if you move on from Zach Wilson?
I would have agreed with that analysis 100% yesterday. But after seeing Chris Streveler, a guy who has been bouncing around the league, got a game late in the season 2 years ago with the Cardinals, the dreaded Chris Streveler, John Wolford game late in the 2020 season. He won a Grey Cup in Canada, and he was at the parade with a fur coat and no shirt on underneath. I mean, he's a very unique and engaging and funny guy. And he does have a skill set that is a nice change of pace. You can't make that your base offense. But my point is that after last night, I don't think you worry about who your next quarterback is going to be. Anybody is going to be your next quarterback. It's just not Zach Wilson. That team is so flat and lifeless when Zach Wilson is out there. And when you are that flat and that dead, and that's one of the real non-quantifiable factors of football. Throw the analytics out the window. This is one of those where analytics meets the water's edge. When your team has no life, when your team has no spark, when your team has no juice, because of the guy who's on the field at quarterback, you're done. And I think they're at that point. Streveler gave the stadium a lift and the players a lift. Chris Streveler, all due respect, but Chris Streveler. You can throw a rock and get another Chris Streveler if you're the New York Jets. So I'd say today, this isn't about who our quarterback's going to be. This is about finding the most effective and efficient exit ramp for Zach Wilson. For our good, for his good, and for our long-term interest in having good relationships with highly drafted quarterbacks walking through the door. That's what a functional football operation based on 21 years that I've been doing this, and you've been doing this a long time too. But I think we've learned enough about how organizations should and shouldn't operate, mainly by watching all the ones that don't know what they're doing. The move the Jets need to make now is buy to Zach Wilson for his own good, for our own good, and now we go find somebody who can play well at the quarterback position, better than Zach Wilson. But the bar, I don't know how, I don't know why, and there must be a hell of a story to be told behind the scenes, Charean. I don't know why it's happened, but it just has. The why doesn't matter when it's staring you in the face that this is just a mess at the quarterback position when Zach Wilson's on the field.
The only way the why matters is if it's going to affect that next quarterback, because as you said, Mike, you've now failed with 3 first-round quarterbacks, the last 3 that you've selected in Mark Sanchez, Sam Darnold, and now Zach Wilson. So if it's an organizational thing, then maybe it's time to move on at some other positions too in that hierarchy. Maybe it's not just Zach Wilson. Maybe it's an organizational problem, but they'll have to decide that moving forward. And you're right, I had written down here, it's not like he was replaced by a veteran quarterback. They have one on the sideline, a veteran quarterback with Super Bowl on his resume. But the 2 guys who replaced him are Chris Streveler and Mike White. So you're right. It's not like a guy's come in and just lit it up behind him who has a veteran pedigree. It's not that at all. It's 2 guys that are journeymen in the NFL who've come in and done that. So, I just think that the Jets are in an interesting position right now in that they have every position pretty much taken care of except that quarterback position. And now it's finding that guy who can get you where you want to go, because this does feel like a team that's a quarterback away. And you made the point, Mike, in the first half of this game, it felt like this was a team that had no faith in their quarterback, and the quarterback had no faith in the team. So, yeah, it's probably time to find somebody else who you have faith in to lead you where you want to go and where you think you were supposed to go this year. I mean, they thought they were a playoff team this year, and they looked like a playoff team this year until the last couple of weeks.
And here's what's amazing, and you're absolutely right. They've lost 4 in a row for the first time under Robert Sala. They have lost 5 of the last 6. The only win came against the Chicago Bears. And they are sinking like a stone in the AFC standings. And we will get to the Jaguars, folks. The Jaguars need to be celebrated. We'll get there. But the more pressing story is this complete and total failure of the second overall pick in the 2021 draft and where we go from here. And you've touched on this idea of whose fault it is. And I think that this is one of those where there will be a lot of different factors into the stew when it's all said and done. Partially the quarterback, partially the coaching, partially maybe we shouldn't have drafted him in the first place. Maybe we should have traded down a little bit and gotten, Michael Parsons, because he fits with what we want to do defensively. He could have been Bobby Wagner and more in the cover 3 defense that Robert Sala is trying to implement in New York. But here's what dawned on me as you were mentioning that, this isn't the first time this has happened. Mike Tannenbaum was the GM when Mark Sanchez was drafted. John Idzik was the GM when Geno Smith was drafted. Mike McCagnon was the GM when Sam Darnold was drafted. Joe Douglas, the GM, when Zach Wilson was drafted. There's only one common thread through the past 15 years. And this is the one that Jets fans will not want to process. Because this is the thing that is inescapable. When you are an ardent supporter of a chronically bad team, the common thread is ownership.
Yeah.
And the dysfunction for so many franchises flows from the top down. And there isn't one specific thing. It is just the owner doesn't know what he or she is doing, and it manifests itself in all sorts of ways that come together and turn your team into something that can't consistently compete, can't consistently contend, and can't consistently win. And you know what, Charean? I don't think Woody Johnson's going to roll out of bed today and say, I'm the problem here. I think I'll cash out. I don't think that's going to happen.
No. Yeah. I think you're right there, Mike. So if you're the Jets, what do you do? If you're right now, you're in ownership, what decision do you make, Mike? What's your next move for this team?
Well, unfortunately, I'm reminded of the first time I ever read the back of a bottle of shampoo, and it says instructions: lather, rinse, repeat.
Rinse, repeat.
What can you do if you're not going to acknowledge that the problem here is ownership, and that a new owner would maybe be the only way to finally turn this team around? Of course, then you got to get an owner that, actually would be a good this is what we're getting to that time of year where we're going to be talking about this a lot. How there are so many dysfunctional owners, and the only requirement for owning an NFL team is having enough money to write the check. You don't have to know anything about football. You don't have to know anything about running a sports organization. You don't have to know anything about anything. You just have to have enough money to buy the team. That's it. So this is an example of it. And I think that, look, my concern is that they've mishandled Zach Wilson to the point where Robert Sala is going to blame Joe Douglas. Joe Douglas is going to blame Robert Sala, and that's not going to be good for anyone. And that's another hallmark of a dysfunctional team. Here's where the dysfunction is originating with the Jets, and this is clearly ownership's fault. How many times have we seen GM gets fired instead of the coach? Coach gets fired instead of the GM. Only one time did they get rid of everybody, and that was Idzik and Rex Ryan. And we thought when John Idzik got hired, he'd at least be able to hire a coach. He got fired with Rex Ryan. But you have to have that sense of together. And I've yet to detect anything publicly that there's friction between Robert Sala and Joe Douglas, but the way that this is all played out tells me it can't be that the front office and the coaching staff are on the same page. And I think Joe Douglas loses this tug of war if it comes down to it, because I think Robert Sala's done enough that he's the guy. If that's what Woody Johnson's thinking, and I bet that's what he's thinking today. He's not thinking there should be a new owner. He's thinking there should be a new coach and or a new GM because somebody needs to take the fall for this failure. So I'm going to fire the guy who decided to draft Zach Wilson. I really do think, number one, a takeaway from this beyond the future of Zach Wilson, I think Joe Douglas needs to be worried that he's not going to be there after the regular season ends, especially if they don't find a way into the playoffs. If they find a way into the playoffs, that changes everything. But I think 7 and 8, practical matter, not mathematically eliminated, but practical matter, they're done. Yeah. So in 17 days, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, we're going to be talking possibly about Joe Douglas being out. And I haven't heard that. I just think that's a logical, commonsensical way to analyze the situation.
Well, you know what else makes this glaring, Mike, as you were saying that? Think back a year ago. We would have been saying these, or I'm sure we did say these same things about the Jaguars, that they're a dysfunctional organization. It all starts at ownership, and this is a team headed nowhere, about to change coach, or, what are they going to do at GM? And now look at where they are. A year later, they fixed that with one move that they've made with Doug Peterson has totally changed that team around. And I haven't heard Doug Peterson's name mentioned, and maybe it's just now because they're getting back into playoff contention. But what a great job he's done, and probably deserves to get into that conversation for Coach of the Year, because he's completely turned around that organization, the way we think of the Jaguars, where they're headed right now, how we think of Trevor Lawrence. Everything about it has changed in a year for the Jaguars. So you see, Mike, how quickly it can turn around if you do have that quarterback that you drafted highly who you feel like can become your franchise quarterback. They've done it. They've been there, and they've done it, and they've come out the other end. And I think we're sitting here right now thinking this is a really good team headed toward a positive future where they have a chance to win some Super Bowls.
Another former Eagles coach who has at least taken a team to a Super Bowl lands somewhere else and has an immediate positive impact. Not Chip Kelly, because he didn't take a team to a Super Bowl, but Andy Reid did it. And I remember after Andy Reid's first season in Kansas City, I thought, Charean, he's going to get people fired. That's the problem. Yeah. Years like Doug Peterson in Jacksonville, an established veteran coach comes in and immediately turns it around. That gets other coaches fired because that makes other owners think I can do the same thing. And see, this is the challenge. Predicting the eventual decisions of the dysfunctional. Because I could see Woody Johnson decide, I'll just fire Robert Sala and go hire some other coach who may be out there who can come in and turn this around. There's a fundamental difference between Robert Sala and Urban Meyer. Urban Meyer was arguably the worst NFL coach not named Bobby Petrino or Rich Kotite, if we want to go back to a disaster that the Jets endured at one point. But it's not a coaching thing. I really don't think it's but look, this is the organization is charged with getting to the bottom of this. You almost want to hire an outside investigator to come in and pay this person by the hour to find out what happened before you can make a good decision. Because if you're Woody Johnson, how do you even know? And you're never going to get a straight answer from anybody because they've all got their own little turf to protect. It's not my fault. It's his fault. It's not my fault. It's his fault. It's not our fault. It's the quarterback's fault. So this is a huge, huge, huge mess. All right. I think, and again, we haven't talked about the game very much, but as I said, you could turn on any channel and you hear that. I don't think you're hearing that. That sounds like I'm being an ass, but I think it's true. We're trying to push this thing forward. These are tough, difficult decisions. They repeat themselves for the bad teams. This is why folks say there's only 10 teams you have to worry about in any given year in the NFL because the rest of them don't know what the hell they're doing. The Jets have been in the we don't know what the hell we're doing category for a very, very long time. And Jets fans will agree with me. And they should be glad that we're waving this flag because this may be the only way to get it to ever change. Here's Robert Sala from last night on his decision to finally remove Zach Wilson from the game and go with the former CFL quarterback Chris Streveler.
Change up to get the run game going. Obviously, I know Zach was struggling, but Streveler came in, he ran a couple of plays, sparked the offense, got the explosive play, and so it just snowballed in a good way for Strev. And so we just wanted to give him an opportunity to try to finish that drive. By the time we got it back, again, same thing. We just said, we're already here. Let's just keep going with Strev. Couldn't get the run game going again. Protection wasn't as good as we wanted it to be. Obviously, there was a couple of missed throws. It was collective coaching all the way down. I feel like he has gotten better, but obviously we got to go show it on the football field. But again, it's a collective thing. Starts with coaching, but either way, it wasn't close to good enough today.
Did you consider pulling him at halftime, Robert?
Say it again.
Did you consider pulling him at halftime?
No, I wasn't considering pulling him at halftime. Again, the intent was to just kind of spark the run game. It was still a 2-score game. Spark the run game, get that thing going. We came into the game, especially with the weather, with the weather forecast. Ended up being a great day, but of a package of plays for Strev to just try to utilize the run game in the event that it really got out of hand with the weather. And with that package, we moved right down the field, had him on their heels. Obviously, we didn't finish the drive, but he sparked the offense, so we just wanted to keep it going. Just keep your head up. He's got to keep working. We haven't seen the last of him.
See, I just wonder what really is going on behind the scenes in the organization. I think Robert Sala is probably of the mindset that this isn't going to work, but there are other forces. Remember last week when they knew damn well Mike White wasn't going to play in Sunday's game against the Lions, and they held that close to their vest all week long. And then midweek, coincidentally, as Coach Sala said, Zach Wilson jumps Joe Flacco for number 2 on the depth chart. But it has nothing to do with the circumstance with Mike White having a rib injury. I think it did, and I think there were others saying we have to do this. Maybe all the way at the top, maybe just Joe Douglas. I mean, Joe Douglas realizes, I think he realizes, this was my pick. I may go down with this ship. I better see if this ship can float. This may be the only way to save me, is to have this kid go out there and play well. Well, Sunday to Thursday, not well and worse. And I like the argument that you have Streveler ready if the weather takes a turn and all you can do is run the ball. But the reality is Zach Wilson took a turn, and they needed Streveler for that.
And Mike, the 49ers and the Jets would be really on parallel paths when you think about Trey Lance. Now, Trey Lance's was injury not being bad, but he wasn't good when he played this year for the 49ers and then got hurt. And suddenly they found out what they had in Brock Purdy. I really wish that Mike White hadn't gotten hurt just to see what this Jets team would have done with him. Maybe he's your quarterback. Maybe he's your Brock Purdy, the guy that you're going to ride with into the future. Maybe you find out something about that guy. Maybe you get into the postseason with him. But he did get hurt. That's the reality. And what you found out was Zach Wilson isn't the guy. So now what do we do? Is Mike White our future? Do we roll with that next year? as him as our starter, or do we go get Jimmy Garoppolo or make a run at Tom Brady or whatever the case may be? So that to me is, you've seen the 49ers go one direction because Brock Purdy's done what he's done, and the Jets have not gone the direction that the 49ers have gone, which is as a Super Bowl contender and one of the Super Bowl favorites. Now, the 49ers defense, I'll grant you, is way better than the Jets defense. It's the best defense in football, and they've kept them in a lot of games. They kept them in every game, and so that's been a big difference for the 49ers. But I do think this Jets team is good enough that if you had a Brock Purdy on it, you would be headed toward the postseason. And maybe if you even had Mike White healthy, you'd be headed toward the postseason.
I said before the season started, the best the Jets could hope for this year as a practical matter was 6 or 7 wins, build some confidence, lay the foundation to be a potential playoff contender in 2023. And that schedule they had to start the season was murderer's row. I said time and again, who did they piss off at the league office to get this schedule? It was the second straight year where all their tough games were early and their supposedly easy games were later. But what happened was, they exceeded expectations early. They created a sense that this team is destined to get a playoff spot. And when you get the fan base, and specifically ownership, thinking that way, and then the air comes out of the balloon and everyone is left with a major disappointment, that's one of the ingredients of ownership thinking, do I just need to press the reset button? Do I just need to clean house? Do I just need to move on? Do I just need to go get a new GM and a new head coach and a new quarterback? Let the new regime figure out what to do. Eventually, I'll hire a GM and a coach who will find a quarterback who can get it done. But it's quite possible Woody Johnson's end result on this is none of the above. I don't want anyone, none of these people, everyone responsible for this disaster we've seen this year, created by the fact that they did so well early, that everyone responsible for it is going to be gone and we're going to start over. We just won't know, and we can't know until it happens. But these are things we need to be thinking about if this continues for the Jets. Let's hear a little from Zach Wilson on his performance on Thursday night and the reality that he was booed, and they were chanting, "We want Flacco," at one point. Here's Wilson after his rough night at home.
I just got to, put my head down and just try and get better, for these guys. And, that was kind of my message to them out there is, I'm trying to give them everything I got. I'm trying to lay it out there for you guys, and it's not good enough, and I got to put them in a better position. Yeah, it is, and that's why I got to look myself in the mirror. I got to go back and I got to watch this tape and just, you got to be hard. You got to be hard on yourself and just say, why are we not moving the ball? And that starts with me. What am I doing that I got to help this team be in a better position to move the ball? Whatever it is, it's got to figure it out.
Is it tough hearing the boos?
Yeah, it is, but don't blame them. We have a very passionate fan base, and they're here to score. They're here to watch us score touchdowns, and we're not scoring touchdowns. We're not getting first downs. We're not moving the ball. We obviously can't throw the ball, so of course they're going to be frustrated.
Look, a little more self-awareness than we got from him when he was asked if he feels any responsibility to the defense for how bad the offense was against the Patriots, and he said no. But this is bad, and he's human. It's rough to go through this. This is one of the realities of being the New York Jets quarterback. But, Charean, it's just not there. It's not working. And I hate to think that the only true wake-up call he's ever going to get is if he's gone. That sometimes, I remember when the Vikings were struggling with Blair Walsh as their kicker. He was great as a rookie. And then after he missed that chip shot against the Seahawks in the playoffs, he just lost it. And I think the Vikings decided we're going to stick with him because eventually he's going to get it back, and we want him to get it back with us. We don't want the indignity of being cut to be the thing that resets him. Reset was the magic word with Zach Wilson several weeks ago. If it resets the only way by cutting him or trading him, but that may be what it takes. And it gets back to what I said earlier. Do what's right for the kid. The kid needs a new environment. The kid needs a new organization. The kid needs a new team and a fresh start. That's the only way he's going to wake up. It's like Chris Carter. Remember, now Chris Carter had different issues. He was a great player, but he needed the bucket of ice water over the head a la Deion Sanders and Tim McCarver. He needed that to get his life in order. And I think Zach Wilson may need that to get his football life in order. I really do. And I hope the Jets do the right thing for the human being. Admit that we have failed. He has failed. We all have failed, and we're just going to move on.
And maybe it's to a team, Mike, that has a veteran quarterback where he can sit behind and learn, a la Jordan Love, just sit back for a year or two and see what happens. I don't know that anybody's going to count on Zach Wilson being their starter next year after what you've seen this year, even if you had him highly rated coming out of the draft. And, hey, the Jets weren't the only team that had him highly rated coming out of BYU. There were other teams that had him highly rated coming out of BYU. As I think you wrote this week, it wasn't like when the Jets picked him, everybody goes, oh, my gosh, how could you spend the number 2 overall pick on Zach Wilson? So there were other teams that thought highly of Zach Wilson. But still, I don't know that there's going to be a team out there that's going to say, yeah, Zach Wilson can be our starter next year. Let's just take a flyer on him and see if it was all the Jets and he's really a good quarterback. I don't know that that's going to happen. And maybe it serves him best to go to a place where he can sit and learn for a year and see what happens after that. I don't know. I don't know what the future for Zach Wilson is. But I just don't know if there's going to be a team out there that's going to say, yeah, let's go sign Zach Wilson or trade for Zach Wilson or however that works out. The Jets obviously would have to eat a bunch of that money, but let's see what we can get with Zach Wilson as our quarterback. I don't know that any team's going to do that. Even a team like this year, like the Panthers, were desperate to find that quarterback. I don't even know if they would do that.
Before we move on to the Jaguars, and we are getting there, I got an email from our friend Wolfie, who was watching in the UK, 30 minutes into the show, and not one mention of how good the Jaguars were. We're getting there, Wolfie.
Jaguars are good.
We are getting there. Jaguars were good, and we've praised Doug Peterson. That counts as part of the first 30 minutes of the show, Wolfie, so hopefully you didn't step away and miss that. It was short. You may have blinked and missed it. Who knows? But Streveler, as exciting as it was, we played the clip earlier. He had C.J. Uzomah wide open for a touchdown.
Yeah.
And it was a very athletic maneuver by Uzomah to just catch the ball. The play is coming up here in this pack. This is when Streveler came in, does the read option, takes off with the football, psyched out the camera, then, throwing some passes, working the ball down the field, creating some excitement, whether it was real or whether it was just Bronx cheer style. But Uzomah wide open. He hits him anywhere remotely in stride. That was the play there. That's a touchdown. Because they showed a replay of it at one point. There was nobody behind Uzomah.
Nobody.
And great by Uzomah to catch the ball. So Streveler's not the answer. It was fun last night while it lasted. It didn't last long. Streveler's not the answer.
Score any points.
It's going to be somebody else. Right. And now, they did. I want to say this. They got screwed by that phantom stoppage. I still don't know what that stoppage was on 3rd and 1. And I feel like I should ask the league at some point. I was wondering whether there would be a pool report. Why did they stop the game on 3rd and 1? Because, as Al Michaels and Kirk Herbstreit said, it looked like all the substitutions had been made. It wasn't an ATC timeout for a medical check that I know of. They didn't say that. What was the reason for the stoppage? I need to remember that. I need to make a note to myself. I need to tie a string around my finger a la Uncle Billy in It's a Wonderful Life, so I'll remember to ask the NFL why the game was stopped on that 3rd and 1. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.